The walls of Jericho have just fallen. The dust has barely settled over the ruins of the most impenetrable fortress in the land of Canaan. Israel has just witnessed a military miracle. They did not build siege ramps. They did not fire arrows. They marched, they blew horns, they shouted, and the massive stone defenses of their enemy simply collapsed. At this moment, the Israelites believe they are invincible. God is with them. The Ark of the Covenant goes before them. The conquest of the Promised Land seems absolute and inevitable. So, when they turn their attention to the next target, a small, seemingly insignificant mountain town called Ai, they do not even bother sending their full army. Spies return from the region and tell Joshua, "Do not make all the people go up. Let about 2,000 or 3,000 men go and attack Ai. Do not weary all the people there, for the people of Ai are few." It makes logical sense. It is sound military strategy. Why exhaust the entire camp for a minor skirmish? But what happens next is one of the most shocking reversals in the biblical narrative. The Israelites march up to Ai, expecting a quick surrender. Instead, the men of Ai charge out. The Israelite soldiers panic. They break rank. They turn and run. In the chaotic retreat down the rocky slopes, 36 Israelite soldiers are struck down and killed. The text in Joshua, chapter 7, verse 5, says that the hearts of the people melted and became like water. Joshua is devastated. He tears his clothes. He falls face down to the earth before the ark of the Lord, remaining there until evening. The elders of Israel follow his lead, putting dust on their heads in deep mourning. Joshua cries out, asking God why he ever brought them across the Jordan River just to be humiliated and destroyed by the Amorites. Joshua assumes they have made a tactical error. Or worse, he assumes God has simply changed his mind and abandoned the covenant. But God's response cuts through Joshua's despair like a blade. The Lord says to Joshua, "Get up. Why have you fallen on your face? Israel has sinned." Notice what is happening here. Israel was not defeated because Ai had a stronger army. They were not defeated because they lacked tactical discipline. They were not outmatched by superior weapons. The Battle of Ai was not lost on the battlefield at all. It was lost hours earlier. Before a single sword was drawn, before a single soldier marched up the hill, it was lost in the quiet darkness of a single tent by a single man named Achan. Most people read the story of Achan as a harsh, ancient tale of crime and punishment. They see it as a rigid story about keeping the rules. But when you look closely at the text, the story of Achan is not just a warning about theft. It is a profound revelation about the weight of the biblical covenant. It forces us to confront a terrifying idea. In the covenant community of Israel, there is no such thing as a strictly private sin. Achan thought he was just taking a few discarded items from the rubble of Jericho. He thought he was seizing a small, victimless opportunity to secure his own future. He thought his private decision would remain invisible. But he misunderstood what Jericho was. He did not just break a military rule. He stole from the sanctuary of God. And to understand why his actions carried such an overwhelming consequence, we have to look at one specific Hebrew word that hung over the ruins of Jericho, a word that changes everything about what Achan actually did. The word is kherem. It is a Hebrew term that English Bibles usually translate as the devoted things, or things set apart for destruction. But those English phrases, while completely accurate, struggle to capture the full weight of the concept. When something is declared kherem, it is permanently removed from ordinary human use. It is transferred entirely over to the realm of the divine. It becomes untouchable. It is either given to the treasury of the sanctuary, or it is completely destroyed. There is no middle ground. There is no personal use. To understand why this matters, we have to understand what Jericho was. Jericho was not just another military target. It was the first city Israel faced after crossing the Jordan River. It was the gateway to the Promised Land. And throughout the biblical narrative, there is a consistent, unbreakable pattern regarding the first of anything. The firstborn always belongs to God. The first cut of the harvest belongs to God. The first fruits are always considered holy. They are given back to the Lord as a tangible acknowledgement that the entire land, the entire harvest, and the very breath in their lungs comes from Him. Jericho was the first fruits of the conquest. Joshua gives a strict, unyielding command to the people before the walls ever fall. He tells them in chapter 6, "Keep away from the devoted things, so that you will not bring about your own destruction by taking any of them. Otherwise, you will make the camp of Israel liable to destruction and bring trouble on it. All the silver and gold and the articles of bronze and iron are sacred to the Lord and must go into His treasury." This went against every instinct of ancient warfare. In the ancient world, armies fought for plunder. Taking the spoils of war was how soldiers were paid. It was how a family built wealth for the next generation. And later in the book of Joshua, God will actually permit the Israelites to keep the plunder from other conquered cities, but not Jericho. Jericho is kherem. It is a closed system. It belongs to God alone. So, when a man named Achan wanders through the rubble of the fallen city, he is walking through a sanctuary. When he takes a beautiful Babylonian robe, 200 shekels of silver, and a wedge of gold, he is not just breaking a military regulation. He is not just taking a shiny souvenir from a defeated enemy. He is robbing the temple of God. He is taking something that has been declared unalterably holy, and he is pulling it back into the ordinary, secular world for his own private use. The spiritual physics of kherem are terrifying. The biblical text warns that if you take the devoted thing, you yourself become devoted to destruction. You absorb the exact status of the object you took. And because Israel is bound together by a covenant, Achan's secret theft acts like a spiritual contagion. He brings the status of kherem into the very center of the Israelite camp. This is the hidden reason Israel lost the Battle of Ai. God's presence cannot fight for a camp that has become contaminated by what was supposed to be set apart. The covenant community has been compromised. Achan brought the forbidden weight of Jericho directly into the floor of his own tent. But how does a man make a decision like that? How does someone watch the miraculous fall of a massive fortress, hear the strict command of God, and still decide to bury stolen silver in the dirt? Achan did not just break a random rule. He stole from the divine sanctuary. But to understand why he did it, we cannot just look at the items he took. We have to look at the exact words he uses to describe his own actions. Because when Achan is finally caught, the verbs he uses reveal a quiet, internal sequence. And it is a sequence that we have seen before, on the very first pages of the Bible. When Achan is finally confronted, he makes a full confession. He tells Joshua exactly what happened in the ruins of Jericho. But his confession is not just a summary of events. It is a theological map. In Joshua chapter 7, verse 21, Achan says this, "When I saw in the plunder a beautiful robe from Babylon, 200 shekels of silver and a bar of gold, weighing 50 shekels, I coveted them and took them. They are hidden in the ground inside my tent." Listen to the rhythm of those verbs. I saw, I coveted, I took, I hid. That is not a random sequence of words. It is the biblical anatomy of a fall. To understand what the author of Joshua is doing, we have to look closely at that exact progression of verbs. Sight, desire, action, concealment. Where have we seen this exact sequence before? Go back to the very first pages of the Bible, Genesis chapter 3, verse 6. Eve is standing before the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, the tree that God has declared off limits. The text says that she saw the fruit, she desired it, she took it, and immediately after, she and Adam hid themselves from the presence of God. I saw, I coveted, I took, I hid. The writers of Scripture are intentionally linking Achan to the original fall of humanity in Eden. Achan is acting out the story of Adam and Eve all over again. Jericho is his garden. The devoted things, the kherem, are the forbidden fruit. God had essentially said, "You may have the rest of the land, but this first portion belongs to me. Do not touch it, or you will bring death into the camp." But Achan looked. The Hebrew word for covet here is hamad. It means a deep, overpowering desire to possess something that does not belong to you. It is the exact same root word used in the Ten Commandments when God says, "You shall not covet." And this tragic four-step pattern does not stop with Achan. Hundreds of years later, another Israelite will stand on a rooftop in Jerusalem. King David will look down. In 2 Samuel chapter 11, the text tells us that David saw a woman bathing. He desired her. He took her. And then, he launched a massive, deadly conspiracy to hide what he had done. I saw. I coveted. I took. I hid. The biblical narrative is showing us a profound psychological and spiritual reality. Ruin is rarely a sudden explosion. It is a quiet, step-by-step progression. It begins with the eyes. It moves into the heart. It translates to the hands. And it ends in the dark. Achan took the beautiful Babylonian garment, the silver, and the gold, and he carried them back to his family's tent. He dug a hole in the ground. He placed the devoted things into the earth, and he covered them up. He smoothed out the dirt. He probably arranged his belongings over the spot. He went to sleep, thinking the sequence was over. This is the great illusion of hidden sin. Achan believed that because the objects were out of sight, they were out of consequence. He believed he had successfully contained the problem. He thought he was just one man, making one private decision, inside his own private tent. He assumed his secret was his alone. But Achan thought his sin was safely buried in the dirt. He thought his actions were isolated. The next morning, the army of Israel marched up to Ai, and 36 innocent men were slaughtered. Achan woke up to discover something terrifying about the nature of the biblical covenant. The morning after the fall of Jericho, Achan wakes up in his tent. The stolen silver, the wedge of gold, and the beautiful Babylonian garment are safely buried in the earth beneath him. No one saw him take them. No one knows they are there. He assumes life will simply go on. Later that day, he watches as 3,000 Israelite soldiers march confidently up the hills toward the city of Ai. But hours later, he hears the unthinkable. The soldiers are running back in terror. The camp is thrown into chaos. And soon, the sound of wailing echoes through the tents of Israel. 36 men have been killed. 36 families are mourning, and Achan knows exactly why. This brings us to a massive tension in the text. It is a tension that modern readers stumble over every time they read the book of Joshua. If Achan acted alone, why did 36 innocent men have to die? Why does a just God allow the entire community to suffer for the secret crime of one man? To answer this, we have to look at the profound gap between how we view the world today and how the biblical authors viewed the world. In the modern West, we are deeply individualistic. We view society as a collection of separate, independent people. If one person breaks a law, only that person is guilty. Their crime is isolated. We believe that what happens behind closed doors is a private matter. But the Bible operates on a completely different framework. It operates on the principle of corporate solidarity. Listen carefully to the words God speaks to Joshua in chapter 7, verse 11. God does not say, Achan has sinned. God says, Israel has sinned. They have violated my covenant. They have taken some of the devoted things. They have stolen. They have lied. They have put them with their own possessions. Notice the pronouns. They, not he. In the biblical worldview, the nation of Israel is not a hotel where everyone has their own private, disconnected room. Israel is a single, living body. If your hand touches something infected, your entire body becomes sick. The heart cannot say to the hand, that was your private decision. It has nothing to do with me. The infection spreads to the whole. When Israel stood before God at Mount Sinai, they entered into a covenant together. They were bound to God, and they were profoundly bound to one another. Their survival depended on their collective faithfulness to the presence of God dwelling in the very center of their camp. By bringing kherem, the forbidden, devoted things into his tent, Achan brought spiritual contamination into the bloodstream of Israel. The presence of God, which is completely holy, cannot fight alongside a camp that has embraced what is devoted to destruction. That is why God tells Joshua in verse 12, "I will not be with you anymore unless you destroy whatever among you is devoted to destruction." This ancient story shatters the modern illusion of the private sin. We like to believe that what we do in the dark only affects us. We tell ourselves that our hidden compromises, our quiet coveting, and our buried secrets have no collateral damage. But the story of Achan warns us that we are spiritually connected. A hidden compromise in the life of one member weakens the spiritual integrity of the whole community. Achan's secret cost 36 men their lives, and it brought the entire march toward the promised land to a grinding halt. Joshua now understands the gravity of the situation. The camp is infected. The devoted things must be found and removed. But notice what God does next. God knows exactly where the gold is buried. He knows exactly who took it. He could easily point a finger from heaven. He could simply tell Joshua, "Go to the tent of Achan, dig in the center, and you will find the missing plunder." But God does not do that. Instead, he commands Joshua to assemble the entire nation. And he initiates a slow, unbearable process of exposure. The next morning, the sun rises over the camp of Israel. Joshua has received his instructions from God. He calls the entire nation to assemble. God did not simply give Joshua a name. He did not point a bolt of lightning at Achan's tent. Instead, he commanded a process, a slow, methodical, agonizing elimination. The text says, "The Israelites were brought forward, tribe by tribe." We do not know exactly how the selection was made. Many scholars believe the high priest used the Urim and Thummim, the sacred lots kept in the breastpiece of the priest, which were used to determine the will of God. Whatever the exact method, the psychological weight of this moment is staggering. Imagine standing in that crowd. 12 tribes step forward. The lot is cast. The tribe of Judah is chosen. Achan is from the tribe of Judah. Thousands of men from the other 11 tribes let out a breath. But Achan feels the circle close just a little bit tighter. He has a choice here. He could step forward. He could fall on his face, confess his theft, and plead for mercy before the process goes any further. But he remains silent. Next, the clans of Judah are brought forward. The lot is cast again. The clan of the Zerahites is chosen. Achan is a Zerahite. The circle shrinks again. The thousands have become hundreds. Achan is still silent. Then, the clan of the Zerahites is brought forward, family by family. The lot is cast. The family of Zabdi is chosen. Zabdi is Achan's grandfather. The circle is no longer a distant threat. It is inside his own household. His grandfather, his father, his brothers, they are now standing in the center of the camp. The hundreds have become a handful. Still, Achan says nothing. He holds on to his secret until the very last second. Finally, the family of Zabdi is brought forward man by man. The lot is cast one last time. Achan, the son of Carmi, the son of Zabdi, the son of Zerah, of the tribe of Judah, is taken. The narrowing circle is complete. Pause for a second and look at the movement of this scene. So far, this has not been a random set of details. The word kherem showed us the weight of what was stolen. The sequence of Achan's desire showed us how the human heart falls. And now, the casting of lots shows us the inescapable nature of God's justice. Why did God do it this way? If God knew the answer all along, why put the nation through hours of unbearable tension? Because the slow exposure of Achan was not just for Achan, it was for Israel. God was teaching a newly formed nation that sin is not a minor inconvenience. He was forcing them to feel the weight of holiness. The long, terrifying silence between the casting of each lot was a physical demonstration of how deeply God takes his covenant. It is also a profound picture of divine patience. At every step, Achan had the opportunity to confess. At every narrowing of the circle, he had the chance to bring his own darkness into the light. But he waited until the light forced him out. Now Achan stands alone. He is exposed. The stolen silver and the Babylonian robe are still buried in his tent, but his guilt is completely uncovered. He is brought before Joshua. The entire nation is watching. The men whose brothers and sons died at Ai, are staring at the man responsible for their grief. You would expect Joshua to be furious. You would expect him to strike Achan down on the spot. But when Joshua opens his mouth, he does not yell. He speaks to Achan with a phrase that seems completely out of place for a man who is about to die. Achan stands in the center of the camp. The casting of lots is over. The slow, terrifying process of elimination has brought him entirely into the light. Thousands of eyes are fixed on him. He is the man who brought the curse of Jericho into the tents of Israel. He is the reason 36 men died on the slopes of Ai. You would expect the leader of Israel to react with absolute fury. Joshua has just spent hours on his face before God, tearing his clothes in grief. You would expect him to draw his sword. You would expect him to scream. But Joshua does something completely unexpected. In Joshua chapter 7, verse 19, Joshua looks at the man who has nearly destroyed the nation, and he speaks with a startling gentleness. He says, "My son, give glory to the Lord, the God of Israel, and honor him. Tell me what you have done. Do not hide it from me, my son." Joshua does not strip Achan of his humanity, but he gives him a final, devastating command. He tells him to give glory to God. In modern culture, we usually think of giving glory as something we do during worship. We think it means singing a song, or offering a word of praise, or thanking God for a blessing. But in the biblical worldview, giving glory is much heavier than that. The Hebrew word for glory is kavod. It begins with the idea of weight, substance, and reality. To give God glory means to acknowledge the absolute reality of who He is. And in a moment of exposure, the only way to give God glory is to tell the truth. Joshua is telling Achan, "You have lived in an illusion. You thought you could hide from the God of Israel. You thought the dirt under your tent was thick enough to cover your sin. Now, drop the illusion. Bring the hidden thing into the light. Confess reality." And finally, Achan breaks. He says, "It is true. I have sinned against the Lord, the God of Israel. This is what I have done." And then he details the tragic progression. "I saw, I coveted, I took, I hid." Achan makes a full, unvarnished confession. He does not blame the culture of Jericho. He does not blame the stress of the battle. He does not claim that the Babylonian robe was just too beautiful to leave behind in the rubble. He owns the entire sequence. But here is the sobering reality of this moment. Achan's confession is completely accurate, but it is entirely too late. He did not confess when the army returned defeated. He did not confess when Joshua tore his clothes. He did not confess when the tribe of Judah was called. He did not confess when his clan was called or when his grandfather was called. He only confessed when he had absolutely nowhere left to hide. A confession forced by exposure is not the same thing as a confession born of repentance. Achan is not returning to the covenant. He is simply admitting that his secret has been broken open. Joshua does not wait. He immediately sends messengers to Achan's tent. The text tells us that the messengers ran to the tent. They did not walk, they ran. They dug into the earth. They pulled out the Babylonian robe. They pulled out the 200 shekels of silver. They pulled out the heavy wedge of gold. They carried the devoted things back to Joshua and the elders of Israel. And the text says, they spread them out before the Lord. Look at the visual contrast. The items that were buried in the dark, pressed down into the dirt of a private tent, are now laid completely bare under the open sky, directly in the presence of God. The illusion of the private sin has been completely dismantled. Achan is exposed. The gold is dug up. The covenant community has been shown exactly what caused their defeat. But the story does not end with a confession. The spiritual infection must be removed from the camp. And the final judgment contains a detail that permanently marks the geography of Israel. Joshua takes Achan, the silver, the beautiful robe, the gold, his sons, his daughters, his livestock, his tent, and everything he owns. And they lead him out of the camp. The text tells us in Joshua chapter 7, verse 24, that all Israel goes with them. This is not a private execution. This is a public reckoning for the entire covenant community. They walk to a valley outside the camp. When they arrive, Joshua looks at the man who almost cost them the promised land. He asks one final, devastating question. Joshua says, "Why have you brought this trouble on us?" The Lord will bring trouble on you today. In English, we read the word trouble. But in Hebrew, there is a profound play on words happening here. The Hebrew word for trouble is Achar. Achan's name sounds almost identical to this word. In fact, in later biblical texts like 1 Chronicles, Achan is actually called Achar. He is quite literally the man of trouble. And because of what happens next, this geographical location receives a permanent new name. It becomes known as the Valley of Achor, the Valley of Trouble. What happens in this valley is one of the most difficult scenes for modern readers to process. The text says that all Israel stoned Achan. They stoned the rest of his household, and they burned them with fire. It is a harsh, jarring moment. Many readers struggle with it. Why did his family have to die? Why destroy his livestock and his tent? To understand this, we have to return to the terrifying spiritual physics of the word kherem. Remember the warning God gave before Jericho fell. If you take the devoted thing, you yourself become devoted to destruction. You absorb the status of the object you take. Achan did not just commit a crime. He brought a spiritual contagion into the center of his household. He buried kherem in the dirt floor of his family's tent. In the ancient world, it is highly unlikely that he could dig a hole and bury treasure inside a shared family tent without his household knowing about it. By hiding the devoted things among his own possessions, Achan transferred the status of Jericho onto his own family. He made his own household kherem. The judgment in the Valley of Achor was not an arbitrary outburst of divine anger. It was the tragic, inevitable result of Achan's own choices. He chose the devoted things over the covenant, and the covenant community had to remove the infection from the camp. After the fire burned out, the Israelites took stones from the surrounding hills. They piled them over the ashes. The text says they raised a great heap of stones over him, which remains there to this day. Then, the Lord turned from his fierce anger. The spiritual breach was healed. The camp was clean. The Israelites would go on to conquer the city of Ai. The march toward the promised land would continue, but that pile of stones never moved. The Valley of Achor became a geographical scar. It was a permanent, physical monument to failure, compromise, and the devastating cost of hidden sin. Every time future generations of Israelites walked past that valley, they saw the stones. They remembered the defeat. They remembered the 36 innocent men who died. They remembered that God's presence is holy and it cannot be manipulated. For hundreds of years, the Valley of Achor remained exactly that, a place of warning, a dead end, a monument to the day Israel's progress was entirely derailed by the coveting heart of one man. It seemed like a permanently cursed place, a valley defined forever by its darkest moment, until a prophet named Hosea comes onto the scene. Hundreds of years later, God will speak through Hosea to a broken, wayward Israel. God will look at this exact same valley, the site of Israel's deepest historical shame, and God will promise to do something impossible. Hundreds of years after Achan is buried under a pile of stones, the nation of Israel finds itself in a desperate spiritual condition. They have compromised again. They have forgotten the covenant again. They are chasing other gods, breaking the very vows they made at Mount Sinai. God sends a prophet named Hosea to speak to this broken, wayward people. Hosea's message is harsh. It is full of warnings about judgment and exile. But right in the middle of this prophetic book, God says something that stops the reader completely. In Hosea chapter 2, verse 14, God begins to speak about his rebellious people with shocking tenderness. He says, "Therefore, I am now going to allure her. I will lead her into the wilderness and speak tenderly to her. There I will give her back her vineyards." And then, God makes a promise that echoes all the way back to the book of Joshua. He says, "I will make the Valley of Achor a door of hope, the Valley of Achor, the Valley of Trouble." For centuries, that valley was nothing but a graveyard. It was the physical monument to Achan's hidden sin. It was the place where Israel's progress was completely derailed by a coveting heart. It was the site of absolute ruin. When an Israelite heard the name Achor, they did not think of hope. They thought of judgment. They thought of the terrifying weight of the devoted things. But God says, that is exactly where the restoration will begin. Look at the profound theological shift happening here. God does not promise to simply bypass the Valley of Achor. He does not promise to build a new road around it. He does not say he will erase the memory of their deepest failure. Instead, he promises to transform the valley itself. He takes the very site of their deepest shame, the exact location of their historical ruin, and he turns it into a door of hope. This is the architecture of biblical redemption. God does not just rescue his people from their trouble. He takes the ruins of their poor decisions, the ashes of their hidden sins, and he reshapes them into the doorway of their future. The story of Achan shows us the devastating anatomy of human failure. I saw, I coveted, I took, I hid. That sequence always leads to the valley of trouble. It always ends in exposure. It always brings collateral damage to the people around us. But the biblical pattern does not stop at the pile of stones. The covenant God of Israel is in the business of reclaiming what has been devoted to destruction. When you trace this pattern all the way to the New Testament, you see this redemptive work reach its absolute fullness. Centuries after Hosea, another Israelite is led outside the camp to a place of execution. Jesus of Nazareth is taken outside the walls of Jerusalem. Like Achan, he is treated as a curse. He is treated as the devoted thing, the one bearing the weight of the broken law. But Jesus did not covet. Jesus did not hide. He willingly took the weight of the broken covenant onto himself. He stood in our valley of trouble. He absorbed the spiritual contamination of our hidden sins, and by doing so, he turned the cross, an instrument of execution and absolute shame, into the ultimate door of hope for the entire world. We all have our own Valley of Achor. We all have places of hidden compromise, places where we have buried things in the dark, places that feel permanently marked by failure. But the promise of Hosea remains. The story of Achan was never just a harsh warning about stolen silver. It was a revelation of how deeply God guards his covenant. And the valley where that story ended was never meant to be a permanent grave. It was the quiet promise of a God who can take the darkest monuments of our trouble and break them open into doors of hope.